I am not a fan of war. Sometimes, war is inevitable. Brave men, and yes, even women, they've got to suit up, wear the uniform, and protect what they believe, defend what they stand for, and maybe even offer their life. The world wars are a moment in time when the greatest amount of human life has ever been spent. Brave soldiers putting their lives on the line, knowing that this battle may be their last. And there's one particular warrior that on that day knew he was never coming home, and that was the kamikaze pilot. And here lies a piece of military history, a kamikaze pocket watch by Seikosha. Welcome to another episode of Pocket Watch Time. My name is Patrick W., and today I'm going to introduce to you a military pocket watch. But before I get into the details of the watch, let me tell you just a quick little intro into the company. So the name Seikosha might sound a little bit familiar, and that's because, well, Seikosha came from Seiko. Or to be fair, it actually came the other way around. So even though today Seiko is an absolute juggernaut in the world of watches, when Seiko started out, they were a little tiny company called Seikosha. And as you can tell from that far more Japanese-sounding name, Seikosha is a Japanese brand. And Japan was very proud of Seikosha. So there was really no other choice to represent Japan in the world wars than Seikosha. And that's what we have here. We have a Seikosha pocket watch. What makes this particular pocket watch so interesting to me is its origin. So there's plenty of military pocket watches out there. I've got a couple. And every brand in the world made their version of a military pocket watch too. The two aspects about this particular pocket watch that I enjoy so much is the center seconds, which I'll show you here in a little bit is kind of a cool feature of how they make that happen, and the specific origin of this particular pocket watch, which is a kamikaze pilot watch. If you zoom in on the dial and you actually take a translation picture of it, you can actually see that this watch is a flight clock. These words in the front have nothing to do with Seiko or Seikosha. This has everything to do with what they were there for, and that was to fight a war. Everything down to the black matte dial to, well, what I can only assume is probably radium hands. We'll definitely do a lume check later, and we'll check that out. What I also find really interesting during this time in the world of watches, this is somewhat of a transitional time. Pocket watches were starting to get phased out, and they were starting to be turned into trench watches and or wrist watches like we know today. So where did this pocket watch live? Well, it didn't live in the pilot's pocket. No pilot had time to look down, pull out a watch out of his pocket, and tell the time. This was probably mounted on the dash. And there were actually special versions of this watch that are more incorporated into the plane. I'll show you a picture of one of those. The pilot that owned this special watch didn't exactly get the greatest plane. Sometimes their plane didn't have an incorporated clock, and thus they needed a pocket watch. And you might say, well, why didn't they get the greatest plane? Well, they were kamikaze pilots. Japan didn't throw their best pilots and their best planes into the situation they were in. These planes weren't expected to come back. So maybe the only timing device they got was a pocket watch. And because of that, there might not be that many of these pocket watches out there. I'm not really sure. Obviously, this pocket watch did not make it up into flight, because if it did, it wouldn't be here now. And speaking of the pocket watch spec, the pilots didn't get the greatest planes, and well, they didn't get the greatest pocket watches either. This is actually a pretty low joule movement. I would love for this to be a 15 joule or a 7 joule ruby jeweled watch. But it's not. This is a relatively low jeweled, using steel jewels, form of a pocket watch. It does have that one nice advantage though. It's got this extra bridge, which allows it to convert what would be your normal sub-seconds into a center seconds. And there's just something about a center seconds on a pocket watch that I just find so interesting. I've got several others in my collection, so I can't marvel you with the wonderful aesthetics of this pocket watch movement. It's nice, but it's definitely not a wonderful or artistically made movement. It's just a very practical movement, and that really just sums up the Japanese culture. This watch had a function, and its function was to keep the pilot on time. Not bells, not whistles, just time. And that goes down to just how it's adorned on the dial. This is the flight clock. There's no fancy words explaining anything, telling you how great the watch is. It's just saying, hey, I've got a mission, and it's to be the flight clock. So I'm very thankful that this little watch found itself into my collection, and of course by finding itself into my collection, thankfully that means it didn't find itself into any military skirmish. With a piece of military history, you never know what the backstory is. But I guess it's safe to assume that my plane didn't get off the ground. So thanks for taking a peek at this little piece of history. This is a Kamikaze Flight Pocket Watch by Seikosha. If you enjoyed learning about an interesting pocket watch, and are interested in learning about more interesting pocket watches or even some odd wristwatches, think about subscribing to the channel. Or if you just liked the video, please give the video a like. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you again soon in a new video. Take care. If you enjoyed this content, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel. Please leave a like, or maybe even a comment or a question. The YouTube algorithm loves it when you do that, and it helps the channel. And speaking of helping the channel, I've got 2 avenues where you can donate to the channel. You can join right here on YouTube by becoming a YouTube member, or you can follow the link in the description and join my Patreon. Thank you, I really do appreciate it.